They have gaslit themselves so much that they're morally superior that they just feel totally justified in the double standard. Deja vu, huh? Another assassination attempt of Trump foiled today, and another depressing look into social media, particularly the people I interact with. It's becoming increasingly clear that perhaps I've been too charitable with some of the left-wing people that I've interacted with. It almost seems palpable how much they want Trump to be taken out by any means necessary. I think that our political situation is very serious. I do. I do think that we have an authoritarian, tyrannical establishment. But I try to always give a message of hope because I don't want people that listen to me becoming depressed and thinking that they have to resort to violence. I continually talk about how any of this political violence is not only immoral, but it is not strategic and it should be condemned. I've been pretty universal in that. I don't know any example I would give. In fact, I've been one of the most staunchly universal people on that. So I from the bottom of my heart, this depresses me to no end because it's just becoming normalized. It's so bad now that with this assassination attempt, it's like no one cares. It's just like, nah. Yeah, the people that are already Trump supporters care, but the media is like Lester Holt in his show tonight. It's like assassination attempt of Donald Trump. This comes as rhetoric is heating up and he's making racist claims about Haitians that are leading to bomb threats. Like that's almost verbatim what Lester Holt's show was. If there was an assassination attempt, even against George Bush, even back then, as disliked as he was amongst much of our media class and entertainment class, it would have been a massive story. But with Trump, it's just like, oh, you could see it in the media's face. They're like, oh, we have to talk about this. Despite what I'm going to say in a bit here, I'm not one that's quick to blame people for stochastic terrorism. So I understand that many Democrats and people on the left, such as Vosh, want to blame anyone who's talked about any sort of issue about trans issues or corruption or blah, blah, blah for stochastic terrorism. So if you talk about immigration and then some lunatic goes out and kills immigrants, you're to blame because you talked about immigration. And I talked about this before that, this oftentimes happens. I don't do that. I think that you should be careful if you have any sort of platform and you're talking about any sort of issue that could cause people to have a very bleak picture of our system, which I do. And so I think you should be careful to tell people, hey, violence isn't the answer. There's things to be hopeful about. But even if you don't, I don't blame you if some nut goes out, Sonsol viewer, this guy that shot someone was a Sonsol viewer, so I blame Sonsol. That's not what I do, and I haven't done that. So I'm not saying directly that any of the streamers that talk about Trump being a threat to democracy or whatever are responsible for some lunatic. If you really believe Trump is a threat to democracy, or you believe that he's a Nazi, or you believe that he's a racist, you should be allowed to say that. You should. I think that you should let your audience know that even though you believe that violence isn't the answer, but I try to hold the other side to the same standard I would want. I don't want to be censored for talking about what a threat I think our FBI is or a Harris administration would be. Why should my standard be what we use? Why shouldn't Joe Biden be held to the same standard that Joe Biden wants his opponents held to? Why shouldn't Kamala Harris? Why shouldn't CNN or the New York Times? Why shouldn't the Democratic Party? Why shouldn't the left-wing streamers? Anyone who blames other people for rhetoric, I'll give you an example, the left-wing streamer Vosh. He blamed Tucker Carlson and other right-wingers that talked about the, quote, great replacement theory when a shooter shot people in Buffalo. He said that was stochastic terrorism. They were to blame. And so, when we had trans shooters shoot people in Nashville, and Vosh talked about trans genocide and wanting a world where people took pot shots at Patriot Prayer people out windows, my standard isn't that Vosh should be blamed for that. But Vosh's standard is he should be. So given that it is almost the entirety of the Democratic Party and their voters' theory that Trump saying before January 6th, fight like hell, means that he's responsible when people engaged in violence, why shouldn't they be held to the same standard? I don't think it does. I think Trump saying fight like hell had nothing to do with him wanting them to use physical violence. But they do. And not only do they think Trump should be kept off a ballot and be criminally charged because he said that. But when Biden says put a bullseye on Trump and then there's an assassination attempt, they want to blame Trump for rhetoric anytime there's anything. Remember when Nancy Pelosi's husband was attacked? And what'd they do? They blamed right-wing rhetoric. Now, this is long going back. This is the game. And this is what happens when the establishment narrative's on your side. So if you go way back to when Congressman Gabby Gifford was shot, she was shot by a lunatic that wasn't really political, we now know. It was someone that was putting YouTube videos up and was clearly had delusions. And yet, the narrative was Sarah Palin was to blame because she put out a political memorandum or something that had the district that Gifford was representing in a bullseye, in a crosshair. And they said, that was clearly inspiring someone to shoot her. And Bernie Sanders himself came out and said, is it even safe to walk down the streets as a Democrat with this right-wing rhetoric? Of course, it was a fundraising email that he put out. Okay. Then we had a Bernie Sanders supporter, Democrat, shoot up Republicans at a ball field, including shooting Steve Scalise. Did the Democrats say, this is our fault because of our rhetoric? No. They said, we all need to tamp the rhetoric down. But wait a minute. I was told if it's a left-winger that gets shot, then it's these same people, the Bernie Sanders, the Democrats, the Nancy Pelosi's. They said that's Republican rhetoric's fault. But when a left-winger shoots people or attacks people, they don't say, it's our rhetoric's fault. In fact, Nancy Pelosi was asked about the Scalise shooter. Do you blame your rhetoric? She became incredulous. How dare you? How dare you imply that? You see? Then when Charlottesville happens, it's Trump's rhetoric's fault. How dare he say all sides need to tone down the rhetoric? It's only Trump's fault. And ad nauseum. That's the game. If we're blaming rhetoric, what do you think the logical extension would be if people take seriously the mainstream Democrat rhetoric that Donald Trump is going to end democracy? That he's a racist, that he said Nazis were good people, that he promised violence and a bloodbath if he loses the election. So that's where we're at. So today, we had the official narrative going into today being, Trump and J.D. Vance are racist lying about Haitians. And so unlike Walls Harris, J.D. Vance is out doing the tour, talking to the weekend shows. And they're just screaming, you lied, misinformation, racist. And he's shaming them, as he should. Then he says, we heard these stories from people on the ground in places like Springfield. You people won't cover it, so we have to create the story, not make up the story out of thin air. They're saying we have to make a story out of it because you won't go talk to these people in Springfield like we are. And so the Democrats lie and say, that was him admitting that they just made up this story, even though he just got done saying, no, we heard these firsthand accounts. That's what we were talking about. And so all day they were spreading before the assassination attempt. J.D. Vance admits that he creates stories that's relating to racist bomb threats that are going in Ohio, and his rhetoric's responsible for this, and blah, 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 blah. That's their messaging today. And then assassination attempt on Trump. So I put on X, just curious, if the same media people that are blaming Trump and J.D. Vance for his rhetoric for violence against people, are they going to blame Kamala Harris after the first assassination against Trump, went on the debate stage and repeated multiple hoaxes that have been debunked, such as the fine people hoax that Trump said Nazis are good, fine people, or the bloodbath hoax that Trump said if he lost, there would be a bloodbath, both of which would be very insightful rhetoric that's completely BS. So are they going to say, oh, her rhetoric is responsible? And right on cue, as you can see from the left-wing trolls that are in here right now, the left-wing accounts that follow me on X jumped into action. Oh boy, they said, how dare you blame the Democrats? I didn't blame the Democrats. I said if their standard, if the media standard is blame Trump and Vance for their rhetoric when there's threats of violence, why isn't the opposite true? Why aren't they telling Democrats to tone down the rhetoric? Why aren't they calling out the hoaxes? Remember, Joe Biden claimed the reason he ran for president in 2020 was because Trump called Nazis fine people, which was a lie. It was a lie spread almost by the entirety of our mainstream media and the Democratic Party to gaslight their audience. And you can see some of these left-wingers, like you can see in the chat, they're not the brightest people. And they don't have much going for them. Not all, but most of the people like these people in the chat, they don't have like lives. They're terminally online. They have parasocial relationships with their favorite streamer and shit. And so when they hear, oh, Trump said Nazis are good people, Trump said Nazis, wouldn't we have stopped Hitler? Wouldn't we have done that? We have to stop him. That's the type of shit they think. Even though, having known that, I still don't blame the streamers for when their fucking psychotic, worthless fans do shit like that. And so you have people like Hutch and Not So Erudite and Sonsol that are like, oh, how was the rhetoric? Now, they couldn't find the words, at least Hutch, to actually condemn the assassination attempt. No need for that. Nope. Don't have to do that. Instead, we'll be like, well, Trump's rhetoric, shit. And you could go to my X feed and see poster after poster. Trump's rhetoric's responsible. He's responsible. And we saw, I forget what it was, MSNBC, one of their anchors said, maybe it's time for Trump to tone down the rhetoric. And we saw Lester Holt immediately deflect, oh, assassination attempt on Trump, but his rhetoric about Haitians. I thought Not So Erudite's posts were the best, though, responding me. How dare you blame Democrats? It looks like this guy was a never-Trump Republican. Well, it's far too early to know exactly what this guy was. But the same reports that are saying that in 2016 he had a post that said, I voted for Trump in 2016, but now I hate him, blah, 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 blah. Those same posts are also saying that he was speaking favorably of Harris and Biden, and he donated to Act Blue. But regardless, let's say it comes out that he is a Republican. Irrelevant to the point I'm making. The point I'm making is, if you're going to spend all day saying Trump's rhetoric's responsible for violence against the other side, then how can you not turn that introspection on yourself? And then when someone like me goes, shouldn't they be held to the same standard they want to hold others to? People like Erudite come in and go, stop blaming Democrats. Don't blame Democrats. You see? Holding them to the same standard that they want to hold others to is unfair. You can't do that. And the best part is, people like Erudite and Hutch and Sonsol, they actually don't get that they're being hypocritical. They don't get it at all. They don't. Because they're so, what's the word I'm looking for? They have gaslit themselves so much that they're morally superior that they just feel totally justified in the double standard. Go to like Destiny's Reddit page. It was amazing after the first assassination attempt how many of them were like, well, we tried to stop Trump using the legal system. It didn't work. So now you got to do what you got to do. Jim Walsh, thank you for the $5 donation, says, can you give your thoughts on the Democrats that say assassination attempts are fake? Love your work. Thank you. Well, shouldn't they be held to the same account that Alex Jones was when he questioned Sandy Hook? Couldn't Corey Competore, his family that was killed in the assassination attempt of Trump and Butler, can't they sue for billions? These people are insane. They're the same people that will call you a crazy conspiracy theorist for all sorts of things, believing that the FBI corruptly spied on Trump's team. You're an insane conspiracy theorist. But they believe, oh, Trump paid a guy to shoot at him close enough to wing his ear and kill one of his supporters and injure several of his other supporters. It was all fake, and the Secret Service is in on it, and yep, the whole ear covered in fake blood. Think about this. He paid someone to shoot close enough to him. Think about the balls this would take. You pay someone to shoot close enough to you that it's killing people behind you. Then you have the entire Secret Service in on it to let that guy get in position, then to tackle you, and while they're tackling you, they're smearing fake blood on you. Either the people that were shot like Corey Competore were fake, or they were real, they really died. All for a news story that lasted a week. That's the Democrat theory.